to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping Orange County. With your host, Don Camber.
Hello, live from the OC Talk Radio studios at UCI's Beal Applied Innovation Center. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Don Camber with another great guest impacting our community in a positive way. Today, I welcome Orange County Registrar of Voters Bob Page. He replaced longtime Registrar Neil Kelly in March. He was formerly San Bernardino County's Registrar of Voters. Thank you, Bob, for being on Impact OC.
Don, thank you for having me today.
Bob, you're overseeing your first election in Orange County, the June 7th statewide direct primary election. Where are we in the election cycle to have an accurate and fair process for the approximately 2 million active voters?
Well, I will say that as of yesterday, we had mailed out about 1.8 million ballots to all of our active registered voters. And so we're now officially in the voting period for this election.
And what happens from this point forward up to November 7th?
So,
up to June 7th.
Yeah, so we, as I said, we've mailed a ballot to everybody so that voters now have an option about how they cast their votes. They can, if they want, as soon as they get their ballot in the mail in the next few days, they can fill it out and they can send it through the U.S. mail. We've got 120 drop boxes throughout the county that are now open and unlocked that they can use to drop off their ballot. Or if they would like to vote in person, we open vote centers throughout the county starting on May 28th.
So explain the vote centers, because some people like to do it in person.
Yeah. So vote center, you can get a number of services. You can go like your traditional polling place and get a ballot printed for you to mark by hand, run it through a scanner, and you vote. But if, say, you come in and you want to actually get a replacement mail ballot or get other services, you want to say you missed the registration deadline on May 23rd and you're not registered yet, but you want to vote in this election, you can register to vote at a vote center and then vote provisionally. A number of different services that we can offer either at a vote center or at our office in Santa Ana.
Now, if you go to a vote center, what do you need?
You need yourself, basically. You could bring, if you wanted to mark your ballot that we would send you in the mail, you could mark it ahead of time, put it in the envelope, sign the envelope, and just drop it off in the ballot box. Or if you want to get a new ballot and vote it by hand, you can do that while you're there. But you just need to have yourself and provide some basic information about where you live and your name so that we can find you in the voter roster, sign the voter roster, check in, and you're on your way.
Do you need proof of ID?
In California, no. There's very specific instances where if somebody has registered for the first time, there are requirements in federal law that you need to provide a certain amount of identification. In California, that information is provided at the time you register, but say you've registered on a piece of paper and didn't provide your driver's license, social security number, anything like that, then the first time you try to vote, we are going to ask you to provide some form of ID. But for the most part, no, California voters are not required to provide ID.
Now explain how your signature is checked.
Yeah, so if you vote by mail, one of the requirements of having your ballot count is that you need to sign the outside of the return envelope. And then when that envelope comes back to our office, we run it through a mail ballot sorter that takes a picture of the signature on every envelope. We have stations set up in our office that can be observed during the election, where we have trained people to compare signatures that are on the envelope with the signature that we have on file with the voter's registration information. And they're looking for similarities between those signatures. They're not looking for exact matches, they're just looking for significant similarities.
If there's some differences, then what?
If three people, because it can't just be one, if three people on our staff determine that they believe the signatures do not compare, then we are obligated to notify the voter by mail at least 8 days before we certify the results of the election and give them until 2 days before we certify to cure that signature issue. We send them a signature verification statement that they can sign to say, yes, I did vote. We then compare the signature on the statement with the signature that we have on file with the registration.
Explain ballot security in terms of when a person mails the ballot and or takes it to a drop box.
So what I tell voters is that they have options for how they can cast their ballot, how they can return it. And I encourage them to use whatever method that they believe is the most secure. And we give them plenty of options. As I mentioned, there is the U.S. mail that they can do. And if they want, we have ballot tracking services that they can sign up for. And if they say they were to put their ballot in the U.S. mail service and send it back to us, there are codes, barcodes on the envelope that then when it goes through the Postal Service's equipment, it identifies that it's in their system, and you can get a notification that the post office is now processing it, is on in the process of mailing it or providing it to the Registrar of Voters office. If you put it in a drop box, we are required to pick up ballots a certain amount of time, but we actually exceed those in Orange County and try to pick up ballots every single day over the next 28 days at this point. And so we're visiting those boxes every day and seeing if there's ballots in them. Those drop boxes themselves are industrial, military grade metal. They're very heavy. They're bolted to the concrete. They have fire suppression equipment within them if somebody was to try to damage the ballots inside. And as I said, we're sending out teams of 2 people every single election, every day when we're going out to pick up those ballots to ensure there's a chain of custody.
And you have 2 people who check it.
Correct, yeah. So state law requires that when we do ballot collections at our drop boxes that we have 2 staff people at all times retrieving those ballots. Whenever we are transporting or moving ballots, there need to be 2 people that are handling those ballots.
Now, I understand that the ballots are in the mail. People should be expecting them anytime soon.
Correct.
But what if a person wants to register and they haven't done so yet?
So at this point, if somebody's not registered to vote, or say they moved and they haven't told us that they moved yet, then they can re-register online. They can come down to our office or your local post office or library to get a registration affidavit, paper version that they can fill out. But the deadline for getting those in to get registered through the normal processes would be May 23rd. After that, if somebody is not registered and wants to vote in this election, they then can do what's conditional voter registration. And they can come into our office. They can come to one of our vote centers starting May 28th and fill out a conditional registration form in person and then receive a provisional ballot.
What are the qualifications to vote?
Well, you need to be a citizen. You need to be 18 years of age, can't be in jail serving a felony sentence, but those are kind of the basics.
Now, let's get real. You're filling incredible shoes. Neil Kelly was an incredible registrar of voters. What makes you believe that you can do just as good a job as he?
Well, I think key is that Neil built an amazing team, and they're all still there. So while Neil has retired and handed the reins over to me, I still have all the same staff that he put together that are there working hard to ensure that our voters have access to be able to vote, that they can trust that the election is being conducted fairly and securely. And as always, we allow people to come and watch. Everything we do is observable. We're completely transparent.
Now, when you were in San Bernardino in the same position, weren't you in contact with Neil Kelly, kind of keeping an eye on what's going on and how elections are handled all over the world?
Yeah, so there is a state association of elections officials that he and I would both participate in, so I would interact with Neil quite a lot, yeah.
So what made you want to come to Orange County?
Well, I saw it as a great opportunity to kind of take that next step, work for a county with more voters, with a good, solid background and foundation for how they conduct elections. Plus, I grew up in Orange County, so it was kind of nice to be coming home to an extent.
So explain results. How soon could we get them?
Yeah, so election results, as we're getting ballots back now, we will process and we'll do that signature comparison. We will actually get to the point where with mail ballots that we'll actually extract the ballots from the envelopes and run them through the scanners. But not until the vote centers close at 8 p.m. on June 7th can we actually access those voting results, tally them together in order to post an election results report on our website, which we typically do around 8:05, and then once the ballots start coming back from the vote centers, we're updating those results every half hour, and we have to stay until every vote that was cast at a vote center has been tallied and is included in results. We can't go home that night.
Explain the website.
So our website is ocvote.gov. It has a lot of information. There are the results there. There's a calendar for key events in the election, some of which I've talked about in terms of when our vote centers open, when the last day to register without doing it conditionally. Had information if somebody had gone last week to let them know that we started mailing ballots yesterday. All that kind of information, as well as frequently asked questions and answers to those questions. We know there's kind of typical things that we'll hear from voters and questions they'll have that we want to make sure that information is available. But also, we have a voter hotline number that voters can call if they've got questions, and we'll answer those.
So on June 7th, certainly is election day, but you're saying on that particular day, all the ballots that are in for that day will be tallied. So what time do you think the results for that day will be in? That's not the end of the rope. We still have several days, but at least what time do you think it'll be done? Probably like June 8th, possibly in the morning?
It's possible. This will be my first countywide election for Orange County. I'd like to get my feet wet and see kind of how the team does. My team's telling me they think they probably can be done around 12:30 or so. But this will be kind of my learning experience to watch them through this process and see the efficiencies that we have in place and see how quickly the votes and the ballots get back from the vote center, so we can get that into the system and get it reported. And then, as you indicate, state law does provide that after that last day of voting on June 7th, counties all have 30 days to complete processing of mail ballots that were received. As long as they're postmarked by election day on June 7th, they can be delivered to our office by the Postal Service or any other bona fide mail carrier within 7 days, and we continue to process those. And as I said, if there's a signature issue, say if a voter forgot to sign their envelope or we don't believe that the signature compares, we have to allow a period of time to give that voter an opportunity to correct that issue so that their votes can count.
Do you anticipate more ballots will be done via mail-in as opposed to in person?
In elections in California, we've seen a gradual increase in trend in people casting ballots by mail. Whether it's through the drop box or through the Postal Service, we are election to election seeing an increase. And now that in Orange County, but also throughout the state, that all counties are required to mail a ballot to all active voters, we have seen the last couple statewide elections, the November 2020, the recall election, gubernatorial recall election in September 21, saw a gradual increase in the number of people voting by mail rather than going to a polling place or a vote center to vote in person.
Now you have a thing called rapid deploy teams.
Yes.
Explain.
So we train and staff all of our vote centers to assist voters to help them through the process. But if there is any kind of issue, either technically or supply-wise at a vote center, we have teams in the field throughout the county that are there to respond and help those folks that are working at the vote centers to fix whatever issue might come up, whether it be a piece of equipment that stops working properly or some supplies that they run out of. We've got that supplies and those people there to help them.
Do you have volunteers who work any of the centers, as was the case in the past?
With the vote center model, where they're open for anywhere from 4 to 11 days, we actually hire everybody that works in those as extra help employees for the county. So obviously volunteerism is very important through this process, and I would like to look at how we still involve certain groups in the community, but ultimately those folks who are assisting voters in the vote centers are county employees who are hired as extra help.
Now, when it comes to voting, how do you recommend people approach their ballot in terms of the thinking that goes into what they cast?
Well, I would encourage voters to seek out whatever information they can. The county does put out a voter information guide, which contains some basic information of what the candidates' names are. If it's a nonpartisan office, it won't tell you what their party preference is. But if they're running for Congress or state assembly, state senate, it will tell you what their party is. The candidates have an option of paying to publish a statement of their qualifications, also known as a candidate statement, in our guide, or the state also issues an information guide that has that kind of information. But they all typically have websites, and I definitely would encourage people to read up and learn as much as they can about the candidates.
Now, when it comes to the ballot issues and, candidates, it works that the two top vote getters in many of the different races would go on to November. So explain that.
Yeah, so there on the ballot in June, there will be different kinds of races. There will be the nonpartisan races, the County Board of Education, the County Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Supervisors, the other countywide electeds like the District Attorney that are considered nonpartisan. And they, in those elections, so for the county contests, there is not necessarily a runoff. If one of the candidates on the ballot can get at least 50% plus one more vote, they actually will win outright in June. But if no one in that contest gets more than 50%, then the top two will go to the runoff in November. In the County Board of Education and the County Superintendent of Schools, their election is June. There is no runoff. So the person in each one of those contests that gets the most number of votes will be the winner and will assume office. For the offices like all your statewide electeds, like your governor, your lieutenant governor, insurance commissioner, as well as the congressional races, the state senate, state assembly, state board of equalization. In those contests and for those offices, the way state law is that the top 2 vote getters, no matter what party they're in, no matter who they are, they will go to the runoff. So if you've got 2 candidates only in the June primary in one of those offices, then both will will go to the runoff. But if you've got multiple, like in the governor's race, there's definitely more than 2 candidates. So the top 2 vote getters will go into the runoff in November.
And what they're not going to see on the June ballot is any state measures.
That is correct. And there were no state initiatives that qualified for this. There are 3 local city measures that, depending on what city you live in, you may see one of those measures. But there are no statewide initiatives for this, though there have been some state petitions for initiatives that have been filed with our office and other counties throughout the state to try to get onto the November ballot, that we're currently comparing signatures on those.
So when it comes to ocvote.gov, that's where you can get the election results. Can you kind of explain how a person can find the particular results that they want? Because there is a lot of information on that website.
Yeah, so when you go to the results page, you can find it by contest. You can scroll down the entire list if you want, and as I said, it will be updated every half hour. But the key thing to remember about results is that the results we will be providing in Orange County will just be for the voters in Orange County. There are a number of congressional state offices that span across multiple counties, and so if you'll just get part of the picture in some of those offices. If you just look at our website, you really need to go to the Secretary of State's election results for those statewide offices, as well as those congressional and state offices that expand over multiple counties, to see what the total count is in those races.
And so therefore we're connected to the state. So therefore explain how the results here are connected to the state offices, so that when they see the state results, those are the results that are the most accurate, impacting people who live in both Orange County and other counties that are impacted by the same candidate.
Yeah, so whenever we post results, we're having to provide that information to the state at the same time. So I can't say how long it takes the state to put the information.
You're worried about Orange County.
Yeah, but every time we post something, it's that information is being sent to the state at the same time.
So what's going to happen is on June 7th, all the ballots that are in, and certainly all the mail-in ballots, will be tallied. But all the results are going to be posted and ready to go if they're ready by midnight on June 7th or a little bit after to June 8th. But after that, then the results start being posted at a certain time every day until they're all tallied. Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah. So mail ballots, as they're coming back, we're as soon as they're coming in, we're processing and getting them ready to be tallied. But when we're on that last day on June 7th, there is a point in time where we need to shift our operations to preparing for the votes from the vote centers to come back. And so we will stop processing mail ballots at a certain point on that day. So typically that first results that comes out at 8:05, because we haven't gotten all the votes back from the vote centers yet, that will be votes that were cast by mail. Typically it will be any ones that we had been able to process and actually accept for counting by the end of the prior day, but sometimes you might get some that we've actually been able to count on election day, depending on how things are operating that day. But then people who vote by mail, as long as it's postmarked by June 7th or dropped off at a drop box or dropped off at a vote center or office by 8 p.m. on June 7th, we accept that, and then we start processing those that are dropped off on election day the next day. And we, as I said, we have 30 days under state law to keep processing those, contact voters if there's issues with those, complete our audits that we do, and the balancing that we do over that time, and until we're comfortable that we've processed all the ballots, given voters an opportunity to have their ballot count, and then completed our audits, and we feel comfortable that the results are good.
And more information is available at ocvote.gov, right?
Correct.
Well, thank you, Orange County Registrar of Voters Bob Page, for being on Impact OC. And I thank everyone for tuning in. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Dawn Camber. Have an impactful day.
You've been listening to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping our community. Right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio.